Welcome everyone, Christine here with a discussion about Total War Warhammer 3 Immortal Empires and what does the community want from Creative Assembly going forward. I did poll people, the results are on my channel community page, though I would take the results with a grain of salt because it's certainly not a scientific poll. One of the problems with polling in general is it's easy to get results from people that are interested in answering, but that's not the totality of people you want an answer from. It's also those people that are not interested in, say, Warhammer 3 in this case, for various reasons. They've been put off for a number of reasons with the game. They might come back, however, if Creative Assembly does a good job. Certainly plenty of people have come back with Thrones of Decay that had quit. We see it in the player numbers. And I might do a video on the impact of that, but suffice to say, we've gone from like 20,000 concurrent players to over 35,000 at peak hours during the day. In fact, it's even 40,000 during weekends. So during the middle of the week, it kind of peaks up at like 35,000, 36,000, and during the weekend, it can go up to 40,000. Makes sense. I'm curious to see how those numbers are going to be through the summer. But here's what people said. Their biggest priority, by far, in a way, is to update existing races and existing lords. So what they want, what a lot of the community want, or the vast majority of people that answer in the poll want, they want more races to get the same treatment that, say, the Empire or Dwarves or Nurgle got with Thrones of Decay. And they want legendary lords to get the same treatment that people like Karl Franz and Balthazar Gelt have gotten with Thrones of Decay. Karl Franz certainly is very popular. He's the most popular Imperial campaign. He's considered the best by the largest number of people. I polled on that as well. So that is what people want above all else. The second thing that people want is fixes, though with certainly a much lower percentage. What they want is fixes to fundamental issues, things like sieges, things like AI, maybe map issues, etc., etc., etc. Any number of issues that are fundamental issues in the game. Maybe even quality of life changes, like, let me give you an example. I would love to have the ability of setting guard mode for ranged units on before melee units off, just because of the way I play battles. That would be a great possibility. I would love better loading times. I'd love better intern times. I'd love better animations and animation fixes and more hot fixes from Creative Assembly. That would be a big priority for me, but certainly I do want updates to existing lords. Now, the third thing that people want is new DLC. So when it comes to new DLC, that is the first question I asked, like, what kind of DLC do you want from Creative Assembly? And here are the results for that. At the lowest level, people want DLC for what I called the Races of Destruction. I know it's not necessarily a perfect definition, but things like greenskins, dark elves, ogres, yes, I would consider ogres part of that, Skaven, and I did specify greenskins, dark elves, and Skaven, I didn't specify ogres, but that is the lowest priority. It kind of makes sense. Greenskins are in a really good place. Skaven are in a really good place. And I think a lot fewer people care about ogres and dark elves. And to be honest, dark elves are also a very strong race. It might not be a lot of people's favorite, but when it comes to priorities of reworks, that is one of the lower priorities, or the lowest priority for the player base at the moment, according to my polling data. Though no, in Creative Assembly, they'll take another opportunity to buff Grimgor again. Like, they've buffed him 3 times with Immortal Empires. Once when they released him, when they released Immortal Empires, the second time when they released Forge of the Chaos Dwarves, and the third time with Hammerkhan being so close to him. Yeah, Grimgor is freaking ridiculous. I might just play a campaign at him and just go with hero doom stacks in this campaign. Absurdity in this particular campaign. But still, point is, a lot fewer people care about this than they care about other forms of DLC, and they care about DLC less than they care about updating already existing lords and already existing races. That's just what the data shows. Now, in the second highest position, and I admit this was a bit of a surprise what the actual results ended up being because I expected it to be higher, But then the second lowest is everything related to chaos. I couldn't fit every single chaos race in it, and I admit I forgot to mention Norska, because yeah, that's the thing. I really don't care too much about Norska. If they get more DLC, great, but I think the community really doesn't care as much about chaos as you might be led to believe. Like, if I look at my comment section for a lot of videos, you see a lot of people that want more chaos content. They want Slaanesh content, they want Khorne content, they want Norska content. But apparently the player base at large doesn't really care as much. I mean, people would be fine with it, they would be happy with it, but it's not their priority. I would certainly hope that at one point Creative Assembly does more stuff for Slaanesh and Khorne, because yeah, they could use more Legendary Lords and they could use rework both of them to be more interesting. From my perspective, I really don't like Khorne and I don't like Slaanesh beyond early game, but it's certainly not a priority for the community. So Beastmen, Warriors of Chaos, Demons of Chaos, Chaos Dwarves, not really a priority from the perspective of the community. And I think this kind of bears out as well with the popularity of the Chaos Dwarves, because Chaos Dwarves did well, but Thrones Decay did much better. And that just goes to show you, like, Chaos Dwarves is an exceptionally good DLC, but it just didn't do as well as Thrones Decay. Simple situation over there. So that's where people stand on it. I know this might be a bit shocking to some people. It certainly was a bit shocking for me. Like, I didn't expect Chaos to win the poll, but I certainly didn't expect them to do so poorly. But that's what the community cares about. In third place, and to my surprise, because I expected this to be number 1 on the list, but in third place, we have the Order Tide. So be it the Empire, Dwarves, Lizardmen, High Elves, Kislev, Cathay, it is in third place. I'm sure people will like more Kislev stuff more so than anything, but keep in mind, polls are imperfect. You get the most enthusiastic people about Warhammer 3 at the moment answering them, as I've stated, and we know Kislev is the most popular race in North America and Europe. But it's probably the most popular because, well, tutorial campaign probably plays some role in that. I really would be curious about that differentiation. And also because these races are available to anyone who just purchases Warhammer 3. And yes, there are probably quite a few people that only have Warhammer 3 and don't have Warhammer 2 and Warhammer 1. Maybe people that test out the game, maybe not the most dedicated of players, to be certain. Although, it should be pointed out with this particular result, we just got major reworks for both Empire and Dwarves, and, well, I think it's safe to say that people care a lot less about Cathay, Lizardmen, and Bretonnia than they care about Empire and Dwarves. I've stated this point many times in the past, before Thrones Decay came out, that if they screwed up with Empire and Dwarves, they could kiss their asses goodbye. Well, they didn't screw up, they did a marvelous job, but yeah, people are just less interested at the moment, probably because of that. And if the reactions that I'm seeing on Reddit, and as well as my own polls on the subject, people really don't care about Cathay DLC as much as Creative Assembly would like us to believe, I think that they're making a mistake with that. And I think that's really being shown by the community reaction, be it in the polls that I've done, other people have done, and just like the storm of comments, both on my YouTube channel, other people's YouTube channels, and Reddit, forums, etc. So, yeah. People really don't care about Cathay. Kislev, I think, would do better, but still, Order Tide as a whole, just third position on this list, is a bit sad because I would actually like the Lizardmen and Bretonnia to be improved substantially, but we may never get that. If this is the kind of data that CA operates by, it might make sense. Like, Cathay, you know, you can argue the Asian market, but I guess we'll have to wait and see on that and how that plays out. I do fully expect they're not going to change their next DLC plans, but they might change their third DLC plans that they're planning to do from now on. And it likely isn't going to be the last. I'm fairly certain that Nagash is going to be the last one. And number 2 on the list in terms of DLC content, it is new races. I'm just using Nakai for the sake of things here. So things like Ind, Koresh. So Ind over here, Koresh over here. Things like Nippon, Araby, Dogs of War, which we know are coming. That is the second highest priority for people at 26% of the votes. Maybe even some more races. I mean, racial DLC can actually be very popular. We do have some mods with some racial mods on Steam, and they do tend to do quite well. I do, however, doubt that CA would do this. For a couple of reasons. Let me just explain on it. I'm not against it, but one, I am skeptical personally that would do quite as well as some people think. And more importantly, there's real reasons why CA wouldn't do it. One, it would be expensive. Like, apparently making huge monsters in this game is pretty expensive. I can understand that with the Thunder Barge. But here's the thing about that aspect. I sincerely doubt Games Workshop would be willing to allow them to do it. Like, it's really down to that. You might say, well, they allowed them to do Cafe. Yes, they did. And they have a contract for that. But Andy Hall has explicitly stated this on this subject, that was probably a one-time thing. Like, even getting Kislev and Cafe was pretty exceptional for Games Workshop to allow them to do that. And it probably has to do with, like, the old world plans that Games Workshop does have. So just keep that in mind, especially with respect to Kislev. But within Koresh, Araby, Araby I would really never expect. Nippon, I mean, those are, like, basically, to give you an idea, there was more information on Cafe than the races that we don't have in the game combined. And there was very little on Cafe, just gonna point that out. So basically, you would be asking not just CA, but also Games Workshop to put in a lot of effort for that, for this game. I'm not saying it can't happen, I'm just very skeptical on the subject. But it's just worth pointing out. But it is the second highest priority in terms of new DLC content. But remember, the highest priority for people is not new DLC content. And it's not, that's actually the lowest priority. The higher priority, fixing fundamental issues, and also updating existing races and lords. Just remember, like, that is by far the highest priority for the current player base. Could work out, though. I'm not saying it can't, but it would also be expensive. I think, like, if they were to do it would show that CA and Games Workshop are willing to be very ambitious, which I think that would be a good thing, right? If they did show that level of ambition in terms of trying to play it safe. And I would say this very clearly. If CA just thinks that, we'll release smaller DLCs, all that, and that will work well, yeah, you're not going to get people enthusiastic about your game about that. And I think CA really should be building that enthusiasm. Whether or not Koresh or Araby or Nippon are the right choices for that, I couldn't tell you. And finally, in the biggest priority in terms of new DLC content would be the Undead. Vampire Counts, Tomb Kings, and Vampire Coast. In that order, by the way, because I did a specific poll for what kind of Undead content people would like to see, and Vampire Counts came out at the top, behind Nagash. Like, the thing that people really, really want with Undead factions is Nagash, who should have content from all those three races, because that's what he did have in the End Times. I would not necessarily recommend the End Times novel. There's some good stuff in them, like using great swords as they should be used, historically speaking, because of their reach. And I did like the Battle of Averheim in general. But yeah, End Time novels are questionable, to say the least. That's me being really polite on that subject. But suffice to say, yeah, people do want Vampire Counts content, especially, and they want Nagash as the highest priority for Undead content. And we're likely going to get that, as well as Neferata. So we may never get Vampire Coast rework, though we might see Nagash using units from the Vampire Coast, because in the lore he did. Like, you want to know how Nagash took Nehekara? He basically united the Vampire Counts and Vampire Coast, and then just marched on the Tomb Kings and beat the living crap out of them, and then forced them to serve him. Cetra refused, of course, because he's bloody Cetra, but everyone else more or less fell in line. And that is the situation in terms of, like, what the community would like to see from Creative Assembly in terms of the overall priorities and DLC-specific priorities. We shall see what Creative Assembly does with this. I would be really curious how much of this matches the data that CA has themselves, right? Because you have to imagine that they do have player data. But it was just an interesting experiment to discover what people want. I will do individual polls on races in terms of DLC content in the coming days. Like, which Order Tide faction would you like to see? Which Destruction faction would you like to see? Skaven Ogres, all that. And we'll see where those results land. But for now, Questine signing out. Let me know what you guys think. What do you believe about all of this? What do you think CA should focus on? What do you think it would make most sense? And what would you personally like to see the most out of this? Personally, you want to ask me what I'd personally like to see a lot? And I don't know if it's going to happen. I would like to see Valten. Like, don't get me wrong, I want Nagash. I want Vlad and Isabella to have an even better campaign than the one they have right now. I would like to see Tim King's improved. Like, I agree with the Undead aspect, right? I would like a High Elf rework. Don't get me wrong on that. Not necessarily a new High Elf Lord, but a rework? Absolutely. Like, those would be the kind of things. And maybe a Dark Elf Legendary Lord rework or uniqueness to their campaigns. That would be great as well. Stay tuned for more, everyone.